Good evening. I thought I'm going to check in for tonight, and what I wanted to talk about for a few minutes is the entire issue about possibly the use of tactical nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and chemical weapons. And the reason why I brought this up is I checked the TASS today, and a lieutenant general by the name of Igor Kevilof, who is the head or the boss of the Russian Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection Force of the Russian Federation military, has made a statement in the TASS that he was concerned about it, that the Western allies or the United States is going to accuse the Russian army of using ABC weapons in the battlefield because of the success they're having. Okay? And then I checked a little bit more about this good general or lieutenant general Kevilof, and last week or 2 weeks ago he made a statement which was where he stated that there's a possibility that the Ukrainians are going to use either biological or chemical agents because the Russian intelligence had found out that the Ukrainian army had procured 30 drones, and these drones had a 30-liter plastic tank in it. Now, any gas-powered drone is going to have some form of a tank in it in order to hold the gas, depending upon the size. It's going to, and the duration of the flight, it's going to be either bigger or smaller. 30 liters is probably what, about 8 gallons or so, 9 gallons, somewhere in that range. So it's not a real big tank. And I do not know on how suitable it is to distribute chemical agents or biological agents via a drone, spraying it over a certain area. Now, with that being said, if you have gone to law school, then you know at one point or another, when you get the introduction to criminal law, that the professor will ask you or give you the scenario of the lawyer who is called up by his client, and the client tells him on the phone, somewhere on the weekends or late at night, usually after office hour, that he is planning to commit this, that, and the other crime, and they're trying to start to plot out the defense before the crime ever was committed. Now, the reason why this is brought up in law school is the question of the attorney-client privilege. Now, if an attorney becomes aware of the fact that his client is going to basically commit a crime, and he's told about the details, then what is his duty? So that's kind of the reason why the law school basically brings it up. And here in this case with the Lieutenant General Kevilof, it is like he's making a defense case already if chemical warfare or ABC type weapons are being used in the battlefield or on a population, on the Ukrainian population, that this could be either a false flag operation by the Ukrainians blaming the Russians. It could be the Russian drone, the Ukrainian drones which are spraying something and that sort of stuff. So this is kind of he's building a defense already before this actually happened. I am not aware of any ABCs having come to use in this war at this point, and we hope they won't. But I will get to this in a minute. Now, the reason why I'm bringing the subject up is genuinely ABC weapons in general are not desirable under certain circumstances to be used by either forces. And it is usually, depending on what agency you want to use and that sort of stuff. I'm not an expert on biological or chemical weapons. There's other people out there who know this stuff better. What I'm aware of, the way they're being distributed, say like by missile or, cluster bomb type applications. It can be spread. There's biological agents out there which could create some flu like we had with the coronavirus. That means you spread that over an area, and the people there will then contain a virus, most likely a viral, thing, and then they get sick, and then, you can basically knock out an entire region without causing death. They're just going to get ill. Sometimes it can happen immediately. Sometimes it can take days or weeks before they actually starting to get sick and all of this stuff. There's various different, products available, so to speak, weapons available, or chemical or biological agents available for different purposes and different things, depending of what the final goal is in that military operation. Now, in general, nuclear tactical weapons haven't been used yet as far as I know. And the reason for this is that because of the nuclear fallout, the radioactive fallout you're going to have when you use them, is that your troops, your own troops, would have to be at a very good distance, so not to be affected by this. And the only time you really want to use this is if you're not really interested in actually taking over that country or that territory later on to utilize this for whatever purposes. I want to give you an example. In the end, in early 1945, when Germany surrendered and Italy had surrendered already, the Japanese were still at war with the United States. And I think it was by the summer of 1945, the United States government and the United States military was looking at either invading the Japanese islands in Japan, the mainland, basically by traditional combat. That means landing on the shores and then getting shot up, and that is a very, very bloody undertaking, to say this at least. It would have been the Normandy beaches on steroids, or past steroids, basically. The other alternative the U.S. government had at that point was, because of the Manhattan Project, the availability of the atomic bomb, which they then decided to utilize to have Japan surrender. And this was based on the fact is that the United States was not really interested in physically invading Japan and then utilizing the land commercially, to do something there, what they could use, resources, manufacturing or whatever, agricultural. Because when you bomb something with a nuclear device, you're going to have the fallout, and the radiation persists on there for an X amount of years, if not decades, and it becomes useless as well for the people who live there or for the people who are trying to conquer this. So any of these ABC weapons and these kind of scales is really only either a deterrent or to get someone to surrender if you have no particular further interest in doing anything in that territory. Because once you do this, everything is contaminated. If you have chemical agents, the soil is going to be contaminated. This is very costly to clean up. Radiation, Chernobyl, that thing is still basically almost glowing, and you had the Russians military there who ducked themselves in, so they were now exposed to high radiation levels, and I don't know if they were told they could do this or not do it, or I just don't know. So genuinely, those weapons are not used if you're trying to invade that country or to take over that territory, that country, for your for economical gains or strategic gains, because you can't really build new military bases there on contaminated soil. And the Soviet Union with Chernobyl, and the Russians, they have experience with this, of what that entails when you have some catastrophe, in this case, happening, and you really don't want to have this man-made, because it complicates the later point. There's always an exit point. There's an end to a war. Wars end at one point or another, or special military operations, no matter what you want to call it, they will end. And in Afghanistan, it ended that they left. There was, each side mourned their losses, and that was the end of it. We have seen this, with 9/11 here. This has, Osama bin Laden got killed, so he's no longer there. The Al Qaeda is no longer what it once was, and the Taliban is now back in charge of Afghanistan. We will see how that's going to play out. But in general, when we're looking at these things, those weapons are really only interested if you're trying to have another country, nation, enemy, opponent. You want them to stop what they're doing without having any further interest in it. Then the territory is done. The people are either sick or dead, and you don't want your own, combat personnel to be exposed to any of this stuff. That is the other thing. So, on a battlefield scenario, this becomes a real tricky, undertaking because of the things we have learned that in World War One with the gassing, and a lot of the soldiers on the opposite side, the gas drifted, and then they got sick, and then even though they didn't shoot this, the other side shot it, and then they got sick, and then all that kind of stuff. It's a very, very iffy, form of warfare with highly contaminated leftovers after it is said and done. Another point I wanted to make, and this is that most nations, when they start a war, the only exception would be the 9/11 attacks to this by Al Qaeda, as it was not a nation by itself, but it was a terroristic attack, genuinely has a particular objective. Now, I want to give you an example with Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler had written a book while he was incarcerated for the Bavarian beer hall putsch there, the Munich beer hall putsch. And during that time of his incarceration, he wrote Mein Kampf, as you're probably aware of. I have read Mein Kampf very objectively just to see of what people were exposed to at that time. I don't believe any of the stuff, I can tell you that right now. And if I would have read that book, say like in the after it was published, 1925, 1926 at that time, even though with the hyperinflation and socialists being in control and the Weimar Republic and all that happy stuff, I would have stayed away from this Nazi stuff, because there's nothing in that book which I can personally relate to, which I have any values or the ideology is so far out to sea for me that I could not relate to the stuff. Anyway, Hitler's plan originally was to attack the Soviet Union. That's what he wrote basically in there. And then with the Jewish people, he would basically drive the Red Army out of the European part of the Soviet Union to the Ural Mountains, URAL, that's what that mountain range is. That separates the European part of Russia and the Asian part of Russia. And what he thought was he would drive then the Russians all out over the Ural Mountains with the Jewish people, the gypsies, the gays, whatever he didn't like. And then the Wehrmacht would have occasional wars every 5 to 10 years or something like this with the people who are living across the Ural Mountains. They would have a war. So they had trained military. That was kind of what he had envisioned. And as we know, by 1940, that the entire, Jewish Holocaust and everything took a very dramatic turn. In that sense, with the deportation to the east, it was like a step. But then it was also clear that the plan was then finalized with the Wannsee Conference to exterminate all these people. And that's basically what happened. So even though Hitler had written it differently, but they had already, by the time they attacked or they started Operation Barbarossa, a goal in mind, and the goal was to reach the Ural Mountain. That was the military objective. Stalingrad was important because that was named after Stalin, of course, and they figured if they take Moscow, they probably would have won the war. But Stalin had the bigger PR value in it because he was the guy running Russia at the time as the secretary of the Communist Party, as the highest ranking communist in the country. So that of course turned into a disaster for a variety of reasons. Military, miscalculations left, right, and center. The lines were, the supply lines were stretched to the ultimo and that sort of stuff. But we had a particular strategy. Similar strategies you can find if you go through the history books for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, where we're fighting, the United States or the Western world were fighting certain things or protecting countries from one ideology against another and that sort of stuff. It's either ideology which was protected or there were real clear objectives. Why Hitler wanted, especially the Ukraine and that part, the European part of Russia, was because that was called the breadbasket of Europe for the agricultural value of it. Because in that point in the early 20th century, the famines and food shortages, since the fertilizer wasn't there and, pesticides and that sort of stuff wasn't fully developed yet, there were still famines and food shortages were on a regular basis still prevalent in the 1920s and 1930s. That didn't really change until the 1950s and 60s, with these big agricultural companies and chemical companies like Bayer and Archer Daniels Midland and those companies getting really into this and the science advancing in those. So if Hitler would have had the A-bomb, he couldn't have used it against the Soviet Union because it was the very territory he wanted to use for food production. So even if Hitler had the A-bomb, he couldn't have used it if that was his military objective, which I'm pretty sure it was. And so it was out the window. They had to fight a conventional war. There was no way around it. And the same reason here is, like I said, is if Russia is really interested in getting rid of the Nazis and to demilitarize the country, that would, but they have no further interest in the Ukraine as territory. They have no economic interest in it. They have no strategic interest in it. Then they may just could have done that already and just literally A-bombed the hell out of Ukraine, leveled the whole thing, and that would have been the end of it. There would have been no Nazis, there would have been no military, and everything would have been radioactive for the next thousands of years to come. It would have basically leveled the whole thing, and that would have been it. They got enough nuclear bombs to do something like this. But they haven't. They haven't even used them on the battlefield yet, as far as we know. I mean, we haven't been told. We haven't seen it. Neither has the Ukraine, because they're not going to do a self-defeating thing and use these type of weapons on their own soil unless they have belief that they're so cornered that they have no other choice. But then again, like I said, is the entire soil is so contaminated, and you don't want to expose your own people to the stuff and your own combat troops. So this is it's a real drawn out thing. So at this point, I don't think that either one of these two sides are going to utilize any of these ABC weapons either in the battle theater or on a larger scale. It is just going to defy everyone's interests in this. The Russians have their gas going through the pipelines in the Ukraine to several countries. The Ukraine is getting paid for the gas the Russians sell to the Europeans, which they're still buying, even though the Russians are not supposed to be getting any money. This is besides the existing Baltic Sea pipeline Germany has with Russia, which circumvents this whole thing. And now the second pipeline is basically out the window for the moment, but they still have the existing one, which was built already during the East German times, because East Germany didn't want their gas to go through the other Comecon countries for payment. That's basically it. So that's how the original pipeline, Baltic pipeline, actually came about. And now if you use nuclear power into this scenario, With these massive gas pipelines, they're going into several different countries. There is several different pipelines. There's oil pipelines. There's gas pipelines. You have coal being moved, in this. One A-bomb in this whole story is over for everyone. That's just the end of it. There's nothing gonna be happening. The Russians are not gonna be selling gas or oil anymore. They won't get paid. The Ukrainians won't make any money with it because the pipeline is no longer there, or the thing is so radioactive that you can't do anything with it. And then the Europeans are not going to get anything out of it because they have no more energy. That kind of scenario. So this is all very, very questionable if you're going to see the ABC type scenarios in this war. I might be wrong. God hope I'm wrong. I'm right, because I don't think that this would be a very good development in this, but for these very particular reasons. Money usually rules everything, so the economic interest on every side is going to be the predominant factor. Yeah, the ruble, the dollar, the Swiss franc, the euro, the British pound, that's the stuff which is going to rule that, and almost every war we ever had was directly tied into some monetary advantage for one side or another, or for all sides. In this case, it's almost all sides. That is the crazy part about this military operation. So that was my kind of take here for tonight. And I have to see what I'm going to do with the lighting. And I don't know. I think if this is sufficient enough, it should be okay. It's not like I found myself a spot in my house here which is reasonably quiet for one. And the other thing is, it is the reflections of the lights. When I turn the lights up on the ceiling, then I have too many lights and things bouncing around, and I don't have one of these rings. So anyway, so we're going to keep it for this at the moment here. The other thing is, I would like to thank everyone who has subscribed, and I would like to thank everyone who liked the videos. And what else did I wanted to say? Well, we're going to have more videos coming up. I'm still getting things together for the video about the Order of the Black Eagle. You can expect that, but it's today, Saturday, maybe on Sunday, maybe Monday, somewhere around there. I got other things to do too. I have to take care of, and I hope you enjoy my videos, and I hope they are either informative or educational for you. That's the primary goal. And with that, we hope for peace. We pray for peace. And with that, you have a great evening.